the weekly Defence Podcast, the show about defence procurement and military technology. We are brought to you in partnership with our sponsor Nammo, and I'm your host, Beth Mondrill. On the show this week, Tim Martin speaks to Mathieu Laveau, Executive Vice President of Airbus Helicopter Programmes after his recent visit to the company in Munich. And staying with Tim, he also speaks to Wallace Lockray, VP of Space Systems at Raytheon, about the future of the space domain. And our sponsor Nammo provides this week's Industry Voice segment. But first, our weekly news roundup, and I'm joined by Richard Thomas, and we're going to take a dive into some naval news first.
Thanks, Beth. Yeah, a couple of things this week. An interesting story from Joe Charlaf in Jerusalem. He's one of our correspondents in Israel. He's outlined the efforts that Israel is undertaking to monitor Egypt's development of its naval forces, particularly in the subsurface domain. But also, if you look at the Egyptian Navy's wider efforts on the surface as well, they've recently, in the last few years, they've procured Mistral-class landing helicopter docks. They have a FREM frigate. They're purchasing Going corvettes from Naval Group. Now, the interview that Joe had with a former commander in the Israeli Navy, well, this former commander described the build-up of forces in the Egyptian Navy as massive. Now, I wouldn't quite go that far.
Is it like massive in the region, though? Like, I mean, if you compare Egypt's Navy with Israel's, obviously Israel has got a very different approach to its naval capabilities, going for more inshore, smaller attack-style craft. So, I mean, in comparison, is it massive when you're talking about it in that context?
Comparatively, the Egyptian Navy is definitely a regional superpower. When I say regional superpower, I mean countries with a border on the Mediterranean Sea. Yeah. Now, Israel will obviously try and up the hyperbole by saying that the Egyptian Navy is undergoing a massive build-up. And it isn't massive. But in context to what Egypt wants to do, it wants to cement itself as that strong player in the region. And its naval service is possibly best suited to ensuring that the aims that Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has for Egypt are met, basically.
Mm. And, I mean, you mentioned surface vessels. Do they have any ambitions for submarine fleets?
They are adding a fleet of Type 209 submarines from Germany. There are suggestions as well, more than suggestions, that Egypt is looking to procure Chinese SSKs, again, as a way to cement its position in the region. Now, that's not to say that Egypt's going to do anything necessarily dastardly with these forces. I mean, every country is perfectly within its right to build up its naval fleet to enhance its own security, but also as a little bit of gunboat diplomacy. Yeah.
And just like one thing, do you think the Egyptian Navy is like sophisticated enough to use all this equipment well? Like, because the Type 209s are a relatively high-end piece of kit, and obviously when you're talking about naval vessels, that is always the case. So,
I don't, honestly, I'll be honest, I don't quite know how sophisticated the Egyptian Navy personnel are, but it seems to be from the exercises that they've undertaken with the FREM frigate and the Mistral-class landing helicopter dock that they know how to use these systems.
Yeah, they're certainly ambitious. Good story from Joe there, worth our listeners heading to the Shephard Media website to check that one out.
Absolutely. Can I jump in with one more?
Yes, of course.
So this isn't necessarily a story that we've written. We're obviously following up on it, but this is the year anniversary of the sinking, I guess, of the Helge Ingstad, the frigate from the Norwegian Navy. Now, Norway's Accident Investigation Board released a report in the last few days outlining the circumstances that led to the collision between the frigate and the tanker in the fjords of Norway. Quite damning. They've effectively said that the ships and the technology were working fine. What appears to be a common fail point on both the tanker, but more importantly, the warship, is that the crew did not respond fast enough to indications that the two vessels were on a constant bearing. In particular, the Helga Ingstad had trainees and conscripts as the bridge crew at the time of the incident. They were operating the warship without its AIS, so the automated identification service wasn't switched on, or it was on passive, so other ships in the area didn't have a digital indication that this warship was transiting through this corridor, other than using the human eyeballs. Now, the human eyeballs on the tanker saw this vessel, did their best to try and notify the vessel that you're in our way. But, there's a certain fail point by the Norwegian personnel in recognising that, yes, indeed, they were on a constant bearing and they should probably take some evasive action. Long story short, the two vessels collided, as we all know, and that's a cost of 1.5 billion to the Norwegian Navy.
That's significant. I know it's only one vessel, but it is a significant chunk of the Norwegian Navy's capability as well, isn't it?
20% of Norway's frigate fleet went down.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it seems to be human error that has led to this.
So the Accident Investigation Board said that the oil tanker had the technology necessary to sort of identify itself and also other ships. The warship also had the technology required. The vessel traffic management system, sort of coordinating traffic movement in that region, could have done a better job, but yet mostly did the right things. As you say, it boiled down to whether people on the bridge spotted a vessel coming towards them and identified it properly, and they didn't. Lack of training.
Yeah, I mean, people need a substantial amount of training to be able to operate this kit. And both of us, the whole team here at Shephard, we travel all over the world talking to companies about the latest bits of technology that they've got that can fit on naval vessels, on aircraft, on tanks, APCs, all these different platforms. But unless you have people that are actually there using it capably, correctly, it doesn't matter. You could spend millions of dollars on all this kit, but at the end of the day, it's up to how well you've trained your personnel and how familiar they are with using this kit. And I think it seems here it's been quite a disastrous failure. It's particularly difficult for smaller navies struggling to recruit the number of personnel they need. They fast-track officers or trainee officers through the system so quickly that by the time they're in charge of a warship or the officer of the watch, they're not experienced enough to really be doing that job properly. No. Well, interesting update, and it will be interesting to see how the Norwegian Navy deal with this now, I guess, capability gap. Really.
They have lessons to learn on the training side, and they've got a large frigate-sized gap to fill or maybe not fill in their future fleet.
Well, thanks for that, Rich. A great overview of a couple of things going on in the world of naval news. I'm just going to touch on a couple of land things. Nice little story about a light mortar carrier, the Alacran, which is a Spanish-developed system, which I think we've seen at a couple of trade shows. It was at Indo Defence last year. It's been kind of touted around the globe by the manufacturer NTGS, but it has now come to light that can confirm that it is now being operationally used. One of those users is the Ukraine, which has a 120mm smooth bore barrel variant of it, and the other customer is believed to be the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which seems to have been one of the first customers and also has acquired about 100 of these systems. Interestingly, they've chosen a configuration which sees it equipped on a Toyota Land Cruiser 4x4, whereas the Ukrainians have gone for a Bars 8 4x4, which is like a light armoured vehicle. Interesting, though, that NTGS is a Spanish company. It's a Spanish-developed system. We know Spain does have defence manufacturing capabilities. Obviously, if we want to talk about naval, they've got Navantia, the naval shipbuilding. So they do have a lot of capability, but not as big as some of the other European countries, which have a really, really strong defence industry and manufacturing base. So this is quite a nice piece of kit. Interesting as well that the first two customers appear to be export customers. Indeed, the Spanish army, however, does appear to be a future potential customer.
That's two pretty diverse export customers, aren't they? I mean, Ukraine and Saudi Arabia, the use case is probably going to be, potential use cases, Ukraine, you can see where that might be used, in Saudi Arabia, potentially down towards Yemen.
Yeah.
Interesting procurements.
It's interesting as well that those are likely, obviously we don't know exactly how these bits of kit are being used by these two customers, but obviously you can put two and two together kind of thing.
I like the idea, that Saudi Arabia's opted to go down the Land Cruiser route.
Yeah.
I got to say that's
very
nice,
regional.
Nice choice.
Nice choice. I would have been surprised if it was on anything else, I think. But also it kind of shows that obviously you'd imagine these two customers would have a relatively urgent requirement for these kind of pieces of kit, given the situations that they're in at the moment, quite close to home. So it seems like this company is able to deliver the kit quite quickly if it is already operational, having been fully developed for only like a couple of years, really. But yeah, just on the Spanish army, they have been testing it. So it is likely that they would be a customer. They've done... So through their testing, a technological demonstrator was presented in November last year. They've then done some more testing throughout 2019, including some live fire testing and displays to the Ministry of Defence. And this is all in the effort that the Spanish army is working on, moving towards like 2035 goals. So testing a lot of new equipment, and the Alacran is part of this effort, again focusing on the use of the 120mm variant, although I think if so desired there could be a 80mm variant sold. But yeah, just like an interesting piece of kit, Spanish developed, as I said, so not something we hear a lot of outside of the big naval stuff.
Yeah, nice story.
Yeah. And just one last one that I wanted to pick up on, and this is in light of our Asia team next week being in Bangkok for Defence and Security in Thailand. So the Thai Armed Forces have now moved towards greater coordination with government agencies and commercial enterprise to support research and development for a lot of military kit. And the government has approved a defence budget for 2020 that stands at around 7.8 billion US dollars, which is equal to about 1.3% of Thailand's GDP. $2.6 billion of this is for equipment procurement. So we have seen Thailand acquiring quite a lot of kit recently, including the Striker vehicles, which started out as some second-hand ones, and now they're buying some off-the-shelf new ones. 8 AH-6I light attack helicopters. The Thai Navy's looking at platform docks, landing platform docks as well. So they're definitely on a path to procurement. And I think next week at Defence and Security Thailand, it'll be interesting to see the news that our Asia Pacific editor Gordon Arthur is able to garner out of that one, because they definitely seem like they are on a upward tick in terms of acquisition.
It's a difficult one to balance, though, isn't it? Because they're going to have requirements across all three services to get new platforms, increase their capabilities, particularly obviously with what's going on in the region in China and other countries. I think, personally speaking, I'm no regional expert. Best leave that to Gordon. But personally speaking, I think that they're probably going to have to prioritise between one or two services and let the other one stand still for a while.
Well, you'd imagine that the Navy's going to be a high priority, really, given the area.
Yeah, I mean, Thailand and other countries in the region do benefit from donations from Japan, from the US in terms of patrol boats and things like that.
From Australia as well, I think.
Oh, nice one. Good shout.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they're going to be looking for donations for the foreseeable future, certainly.
Yeah. So, Gordon will be there next week bringing you all the news. So you'll be able to head to the Shephard Media website to check out everything from Thailand and the show over there. Thanks for that, Rich. And
thank you.
For more information on all the stories that we have covered this week, links will be included in the show notes, or you can head to the Shephard Media website. Coming up on the podcast, we speak to Wallace Lockreat, VP Space Systems at Raytheon, about the future of the space domain. But first, Tim Martin speaks to Matthew Laveau, Executive Vice President of Airbus Helicopter Programmes, after his recent visit to Munich. We wanted to take a short break into the podcast to tell you about Shephard Studio. Studio is our branded content offering, which gives industry a more creative way to tell their stories. Shephard Studio works closely with companies and event organisers in the aerospace and defence industry to provide bespoke, co-branded solutions, whether it is supporting a particular campaign, content surrounding a major trade show, or bringing Studio on board to more effectively tell a company's story. Studio has already been adopted by many of the major defence primes, including Raytheon, Northrop Grumman and Viasat. If you're interested in learning more about Studio projects and how they could benefit your company, please visit us at www.shephard.studio.
I'm Shephard Media's Deputy Art Editor, Tim Martin, and I'm delighted to say, as part of Airbus Media Trade Event 3-day press trip, that I'm joined by Matthew Laveau, who is the Airbus EVP of Programmes. And we're going to discuss, Matthew, the defence side of the house, I guess, from Airbus, because we've heard a lot about how the business is going today, not only from a program side but also a technology point of view. I thought maybe we could begin by talking about the involvement of Airbus in particular with their strong presence in terms of US helicopter training market. Because we heard there was now 440 Lakotas in service. That to me was a very significant number that came out of some of the press briefings that were being discussed today.
Yes, I mean, we have grown this very large presence with the US federal government, with the Lakotas, but also earlier we had the Dolphins that took the Coast Guard, and as well all the aircraft flying from Customs and Border Patrol, the H-125. And I think what our success was to have very affordable platforms, firstly developed for the civil market, that came also as the right platform at the right cost and with the right performance for military use. So we also localized a lot of value added in the US. These platforms are now more than 50% produced and developed in the US. So we are a very good US citizen, especially we have a facility in Columbus, Mississippi, where we employ more than 40% of veterans, US veterans. So I think both the performance of the platforms in reliability and cost effectiveness and all the efforts we made to develop US jobs and industry were rewarded, and we are very happy to be a strong partner of the US Departments of Defense.
And you mentioned the Columbia, Mississippi facility. That would potentially be used for the US Navy training helicopter program that's ongoing and is due for a contract award anytime this month, actually. How optimistic are you of Airbus's chances with the H-135?
Quite optimistic. The H-135 has been a resounding success in training for many armies. The UK chose it, Japan, Australia, Germany. All those countries trusted the 135, and the 135 because it's a very affordable platform, but it's a twin-engine platform, which is very important for training pilots who will fly mostly twin-engine platforms, larger, more capable platforms in military missions. So we feel it's really the best platform for that type of use, and we hope that the very good experience the US Army had in Mississippi will have a positive influence on the Navy. The Lakota is flown also by the Navy today at Pax River, and it has a very, very high mission success and rate of availability. So we are very confident this example will give a positive push for the 135 with the Navy, and confident about the result.
And moving up to kind of maybe the medium range that we heard about, the H-160 and the partnership that Airbus has with France. So 169 aircraft are going to be part of a tri-service deal for France. Obviously, that's huge business. But also it was interesting to hear that potentially if export customers come on board, they would have to wait potentially until 2026 for the first aircraft deliveries of France. They would join the production line at that stage. Is that just kind of the nature of the program, because France are the launch customer and this is huge business effectively, and that's Airbus have to make sure that the priority here is France?
No, I mean, we would, of course, be delighted to have export customers. I guess on the military version, and it's quite understandable, a lot of export customers want to see the confirmation and the first steps of the French program, but I hope they will not wait for the French program to be fully delivered to place orders. It can happen before. It was the case when we had the NH90 and Tiger. We had parallel programs between export and French military procurement. So I guess the same would be possible for the 160. But for the time being, it's true that the nation that made a bet on the 160, that started the program, that will invest in militarizing the platform in France. So that will be our top priority in the next years. And if export orders come along the way, we'll be happy to serve them as well with the same energy as we do for France today.
Okay, and at the very end of the market then, on the heavy side then, for the H225, we've seen the Kuwait aircraft in flight recently. Is that kind of a piece of business that you'd be keen to highlight? And what other opportunities would you see for the 225 for military customers?
Well, the 225 had a lot of export successes recently. Quite interesting is as well how fast a certain number of 225s pre-owned 225s that were flying for offshore missions for the oil and gas industry got very quickly reconverted for governments, mostly in military or parapublic missions. And it showed that how versatile the platform is, how capable it is. I mean, it's autopilot, it's very long range, its cabin size. Well, it has a lot of characteristics that make it unique and offer a very interesting capabilities for all sorts of missions, be they search and rescue, be they troop transport, be they resupply of ships. So we feel there will be other orders, other customers. Many militaries around the world have chosen the 225. Brazil, Mexico, Kuwait, Singapore, France, of course. So Japan. So we think there will be many other orders, Hungary most recently. So there is good momentum around the platform. We are very focused on delivering the big contracts we have captured in the recent years. We have some campaigns running in different countries. I cannot name them all today, but we're quite confident about the success of this and the continuous career of the 225 in its military version.
Okay, and just to wrap up, maybe a final word on the American market, because it looks like for military helicopter procurement that the future vertical lift applications will be tilt rotors or coaxial rotors by and large, and Airbus aren't in that space, perhaps. Maybe it's fair to say if that's not kind of being too unkind to the company.
Well, I mean, we are very confident of our concept. We had the X-Cube demonstrator a few years ago, which showed a very interesting performance at a very affordable cost. And we think that our concept both preserves a very good flight characteristic of the aircraft, not having speed at the expense of payload, but keeping a lot of payload and mission performance. And also, it's a very affordable solution that doesn't drive up massively the cost of the platform. So we think we have an excellent technical concept. We are getting support from the European Union programs, Clean Sky, to mature the demonstrator about it. We think it might have a military application one day. We were, of course, disappointed not to be selected for FARA, but in the US for the reconnaissance aircraft. But we are open to partnerships if need be, and we'll of course be happy if one day the US reconsiders or other customers are interested in a very efficient and affordable speed concept. We would be happy to propose them the Racer and our X-Cube based solution. I think it's a very good concept, and we are eager to grow it first in civil, but also in military applications in the next years. And we feel it's the speed concept for the 2040s.
Okay, Mathieu, thanks very much. And we look forward to hearing updates across all the Airbus family of products as developments happen. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Tim.
While the podcast is a newer venture for Shephard Media, we've actually been in the defence publishing business for almost 40 years and have built up a strong and loyal audience base. Our content is trusted and consumed by key decision makers through Shephard Media's multiple channels. One benefit of having such a dedicated audience base is our ability to offer a comprehensive range of message delivery options to our advertisers. From brand awareness campaigns across a combination of print and digital media, through targeted email campaigns or show dailies, to a multitude of online opportunities, or even advertising opportunities within the podcast itself. If you'd like to know more, please visit shepherdmedia.com/advertising.
I'm now joined by Wallace Loughrey, VP for Space Systems at Raytheon, and we're going to talk about the company's position within space. And I suppose, Wallace, if we begin by mentioning that maybe Raytheon's position as a defence entity is obviously very well known. It has a commanding kind of reputation within the industry, but maybe less well known within the space sector. Can you shed some more light on their role within the domain?
Sure. We, as a business, relative to space, we cover the gamut from everything from building payloads to ground control to processing, and that's pretty much everywhere in the globe. And it's our business, the business that I run, we build primarily satellite payloads. So whether that be for commercial or science, we build sensors for NASA and NOAA for Earth observation. The primary weather sensor that they use on a system called JPSS. It's called, the system we build is called VIIRS. In addition, we do commercial imaging. So Earth observation for commercial companies like Digital Globe and others. And then on top of that, our defense business covers missile warning, missile defense, ISR, and many, many other missions that our customers are looking for: electro-optic, infrared, and just about every phenomenology across the spectrum.
Yeah, and your main facilities for this, the main hub of innovation, I guess, is just outside LA. Can you give any kind of insight into the scale of the work that you do there, and kind of from a resourcing side, what you guys have going on there?
Yeah, so our primary headquarters site for the space systems business is in El Segundo, California, just a little bit south of the airport of LAX. And that business has been there. We've been located there for over 30 years. We have infrastructure related to design, integration, and test. And those, we have somewhere on the order of 1,500 to 2,000 employees that work just in the space business. And like I said, that's everything from design engineers to manufacturing to integration and test. And we also have facilities in other parts of the world where we do work, some here in the UK. And so we're looking at expanding from where we are right now to other parts of the US and then outside to tap into the talent and find opportunities to expand the business that we have to offer solutions to other customers that traditionally wouldn't think of Raytheon as a space business.
And in terms of being involved in payload manufacturing, what exactly are militaries looking for, more and more, or kind of what are you seeing on the demand side?
It's our business is probably healthier than it's ever been. We have close to 20 different payloads right now that we're building in some form of some state of development. And it really covers the gamut from across all phenomenologies and missions. I think as you look at what many of our customers are recognizing is that space, we would call it the ultimate high ground. That's what many have called it. But because of so many of the advances in things like launch, which have driven the cost down to get satellites onto orbit, and the expansion of electronics, it is really opening up a lot more opportunities for many of our customers to take some of their traditional missions, which they've done from airborne platforms or ground-based radars or others, to space, where they have a more prolific long-term view of the kinds of things that they need to observe.
Okay, and I suppose one kind of more recent trend within the space domain has been national governments looking to protect satellites, whether that's from anti-jamming or anti-radiation technologies. Is there a role that Raytheon can play in that, or what is your sense from military users on that front?
Yeah, while there's a lot of talk about what other countries are doing, for us, we build the most robust systems we can against whatever our customers' requirements are, whether that be being able to work in a very high radiation environment or dealing with space weather or other environmental constraints. And so it's something that we take very seriously in what we design into our systems based on what our customers' needs are.
Okay, and we're speaking in London, and of course the UK obviously has kind of a fairly robust strategy in terms of what they want to work on in terms of the space domain. In particular, they'll move towards the next generation military system, Skynet 6. So is there kind of something that Raytheon can work on that front, or kind of what is the relationship or nature of partnerships between the UK and Raytheon?
That's a great question, because that's something that we're looking at, having discussions with our partners here in the UK, really trying to understand where the MOD and the UK are trying to go to. We have a portfolio of technologies that really cut across, especially in communications. Another part of our business, of the Raytheon business, is the groundwork that we do for many of our customers. So there's another aspect where we build ground control stations for the future GPS constellation, the weather systems for most of the world, where we integrate multiple different systems together. And so taking that portfolio of technologies, whether it be on the space side or the ground side, the exploitation side, and working to see if there are opportunities where, again, like you pointed out earlier, we're not necessarily really well known for our space business, but getting out there and looking for partnerships with the portfolio of technology and capabilities that we have across the company.
Okay, and earlier I think you'd mentioned missile warning, and that's a big part of the portfolio. We're seeing now a kind of huge upsurge in missile proliferation. So I suspect that the demand on the missile warning side is absolutely huge too.
Yeah, it's one of the areas where we certainly see the biggest demand. And as a company, one of the reasons why we feel that we have a lot to bring to the table for many of our customers is when you look at what we do in missile defense and missile warning across the board, whether that be the Patriot system, the effectors that we build, the ground-based radars that we build, looking at what are the capabilities of bringing to bear another element of that to provide more capability for many of our allies and countries that we do work with from a space perspective. It's definitely something that we're exploring and looking at. Not just can you just go build a space system, but how do we make the systems that either Raytheon builds or in some cases other companies build, that we can add other layers of sensing into them so there are earlier indications and warning. It's definitely something we're spending a lot of time on.
And on the operational front, I guess what's always said to be essential from a satellite point of view is that it supports troop movement and battlefield communications. And so, generally speaking, what else can Raytheon help in terms of supporting those kinds of real hardcore military objectives?
There are other parts of the business that build ground-based radios, SATCOM radios. So we sell those around the world to many of our customers to provide a more, an integrated solution across all of the various communication systems that our military and our allies use. In addition, we have a whole range of GPS position navigation and time, equipment. We do, so it really cuts across the board in our business what we do relative to leveraging what's in space for whether that be troops in a platoon or at the strategic level. So it really cuts across. But it's something that when you look across Raytheon, all the pieces are there. And so we're trying to bring as many of those together to offer solutions to our customers.
And how do you kind of get the attention of customers then and kind of persuade them that maybe some of the more well-known companies, what you offer and what you can present on the table is just as worthy as what those guys can offer?
That is one of the quandaries that we sometimes work through. And for us, it's really all about committing and executing on the commitments we make to our customers. So we are doing a number of, we'll do demonstrations with other allies that we're trying to consider if there's an opportunity for us to bring something to bear. And also we are open and having a lot of discussions with other partners who may be more well-known here in Europe or other parts of the country where we have capability that they may not have. So there's an opportunity to collaborate, and we're exploring all of those right now, but definitely looking for learning more about what we don't know and finding opportunities to bring the technologies and mission capabilities that we have across the company to bear.
And on the missile warning side, there was some good news recently in terms of the successor for Patriot. The US DoD awarded Raytheon $384 million for 6 production representative systems for the Future Integrated Air and Missile Defence system. Can you give us an indication of how that program is going to roll out, and I suppose why Raytheon were selected for the program too?
Yeah, so that one's not in. I think it's exciting for the company. It's a franchise that's been a big part of the Raytheon company for a long time, and it's certainly exciting as a Raytheon employee to see that all the capabilities that the company has put to bear to ensure that our customers have the most robust and advanced systems that we can build. There's a long way to go, but that team is doing a lot of really amazing things.
Okay, and if we kind of step back from from kind of developments within space and the topical issues that we've discussed, what about your role in space? Because you have a US Air Force background, what was kind of the draw to the domain?
So I went to the Air Force Academy for my undergraduate, and then ended up in my first assignment at the headquarters for Air Force Space Command, and spent most of my time in the Air Force, in space. I then came to Raytheon and have been at Raytheon most of my career since I've been out of the Air Force, and have been working in space for over 20 years. It's very exciting. It's certainly high technology, and it's a way to bring a mission capability to bear that many of our customers, especially right now, like I said earlier, just the advances in electronics and launch and others are opening up the opportunity for many of our customers. And so it's beyond the fact that when I was a kid I read all about space, and but it's definitely exciting. It's an exciting place to be in Raytheon. We're a very technology-driven company, and we've made a lot of investments over the years in mission technologies for our customers. So when you combine it all with just a pretty good place to work, a good team to work with, and some really amazing technology, it's a great place to be.
Yeah, and would it be fair to say that I suppose within the defence sector, space doesn't maybe get the column inches that it deserves? When you consider the commercial achievements, finding water on the moon, for example, that's something that, I guess is, huge from a human development point of view. It's absolutely incredible. But from the defence side, maybe the achievements that both industry and militaries are kind of working on is, perhaps underplayed.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd say underplayed. I think one of the there's so many technologies that are used for whether that be exploration, for science, and the foundational basis behind the way we build our space systems is a lot of the same. They have to be able to survive in a very harsh natural environment, very cold, not a lot of sun, hard to generate power, radiation environment. And so, there's definitely a lot of things that think of GPS. The GPS constellation provides for us every day. And you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's not quite as exciting as the L-Cross mission, which you mentioned, which found water on the moon and crashed into a crater on the moon. But both are equally important to us. So again, space is a very exciting time to be working in space with all the opportunity that's available.
And how do you see maybe future conflicts playing out and the role of space?
Well, I mean, you mentioned earlier just the proliferation of various missile technologies or others. Space, again, offers that sort of view of the world with a much, much wider observation angle. And so I think space brings a capability which we've always known. It's just now more accessible. And I think many of the U.S. and its allies are all trying to work through what is the role of space in a broader sense than necessarily what it's been largely to date. So it's one of the areas where there's a lot of analysis that's going on, mission analysis, mission engineering, to see how do you bring space capabilities in to support and augment the systems that have been bought to date.
Okay, and I guess maybe one trend in terms of geopolitical infrastructures is that more and more governments are looking to protect national assets in space. For manufacturers, what might that mean? And could there be more fragmentation, I guess, between or disputes rather between national allies and we're seeing, for example, you mentioned GPS. There's going to be a rival to that, Galileo, and there'll be a military variant to that. I'm not asking, I guess, for you to speculate on political manoeuvrings and things like that, but just because it seems to be important in terms of the future evolution of these things, what do you think that might mean for manufacturers?
Yeah, so as I pointed out earlier, to us, it's more about what are the types of mission solutions that our customers are looking for, and we focus on the investment and the infrastructure and the people and the capabilities that we need, regardless of where sort of the political tides roll. There are core technologies for these space programs and missions that we invest in, whether that be in electronics, design and manufacturing, and getting into smaller size, weight, and power electronics, which allow you to get into a smaller satellite and still get the same value out of it from a mission perspective. Optical systems, focal plane arrays, and radiation hardened. So to us, it's about having a portfolio of technology that we can address our customers' needs once some of those other challenges that you mentioned kind of get worked out.
Okay, and is there any big programs or major contracts forthcoming that you guys are involved in, or you'd like to disclose?
I don't have any to disclose. We're pretty excited about the portfolio that we have. It's exciting for the company, and certainly exciting for our employees, and more importantly, we're delivering on the commitments that we make to our customers.
Okay, well, I think we'll wrap it up there, and thanks very much for your time. We look forward to hearing all about Raytheon's space-based projects as they move forward.
Thank you.
Welcome to this week's Industry Voice segment, the part of the show that is brought to you in partnership with our sponsor, Nammo. I'm joined by our regular contributor, Anders Lunde, who is the Senior Vice President for Communications at Nammo. So this week we're going to talk about export controls, obviously a very important part of the defence industry. So Anders, what is like the latest goings on in this area?
What brought it up a little bit now is that there was a visit by Bill Greenwald of the Atlantic Council in Oslo last week, and he wrote reports some time back on the state of U.S. export controls, in particular on ITAR regime, and a little bit on his background and what he sees as a need for reform. And that's something that has come up as a discussion multiple times. I chaired a panel on this back in May, and in DC during a conference there, and I think it's a discussion that needs to be brought up again, because there was several articles that came out this week as well about the challenges related to export controls in Europe and how different countries have different practices and how this could impact on future defense cooperation. And I think one issue that was brought up by some people during these discussions that were here in Norway over the past couple of weeks was, could it be an option to do almost a defense free trade zone or free trade agreement instead of trying to expand or to create some sort of radical reallocation of the current export control regimes? I thought that was a very interesting idea.
So what would like that kind of defence agreement entail then?
So that would be an agreement that would entail that different countries would accept to respect each other's export controls. So if, for instance, you're cooperating on a program, so often these things are done on a bilateral basis today. So they will make an agreement that, okay, we're cooperating on this particular product or program, and we will, this country's laws, where maybe the final assembly happens, those are the ones that will guide the export of the total product. And what could be an option in an agreement like this would be where the countries would, who are all party to it, would have a sort of general agreement that they would allow the country, the final country of export, the final country of assembly, or really has the final design, to be the one that makes the decisions on the export to a third party. And within that zone, they will be free to share technology and to move components and so on, with some exceptions, I imagine, but that would be the basic rule. And what this would enable is a much quicker and more effective development and construction and manufacturing of key and critical equipment within those closely aligned countries that are within this zone, where they could then cooperate much more efficiently to meet new requirements and to develop those for the future.
Yeah, because I think with like export restrictions, obviously they are valid and they are needed in this industry, but
absolutely,
it does present not necessarily a roadblock, but it does present a lot of issues for industry that want to meet requirements. When requirements come up, it just slows down that process in a process that is already quite a sluggish one in terms of delivering when it comes to defence equipment. Obviously, you've got all the government side of things as well to deal with. So anything, I guess, that can speed up the process is beneficial to the customer, to the industry. What do you think is like the likelihood of like something like this being adopted? Or because we hear about everything is like, let's do the process quicker, let's get more efficient and all this kind of thing. But that's like a rhetoric that we've all been hearing for years. So what do you think is the likelihood of this kind of thing being adopted from your recent like experience like in these talks and stuff like that?
At this point, I think this idea is relatively new, and I haven't heard it discussed that much. So it's really difficult to say how much of a appeal this would have. But I think as we continue to develop new technologies and we face the kind of challenges that we're looking at, the re-emergence of peer-on-peer competition and so on between major powers, I think trying to concentrate the export control regimes on what is really its core purpose, which is to make sure that technology and equipment doesn't fall into the wrong hands, that we have to focus on that and try to negate those, should we say, side effects, which are that it ends up complicating the cooperation between close allies and partners that are trying to work for a common purpose. So I think those are that's really what's going to be an increase in requirement going forward. And we have to make sure that the export control regime is actually doing or being efficient in the way that it should be efficient. It focuses on those effects that it really wants to avoid. And we try to find a way of making sure that the same regime that is supposed to make sure that technology and equipment doesn't flow to Iran or flow to other countries that are on embargo, that same regime isn't preventing us from sharing with some of our closest allies. So if that happens, then because that's a little bit what's happening today, and I think we need to find a way where maybe we concentrate the functioning of an export control regime towards what it really is about. I mean, and let's also face it that export controls and export of military equipment is always going to be a political question. That you can never get around that. I mean, defense exports are at their core a foreign policy tool for many countries. So that also comes in here and will complicate matters. But I think, as we saw, this was what really drove forward the creation of NATO, the creation of the kind of post-World War II alliances that we've seen. That was the recognition of the need for close countries to cooperate better and to have some sort of standardization that allows them to stand together in times of need. And I think that this could be a new development for the future great power competition. And the developments we're seeing is, let's find another regime, another tool that allows us to build that sort of cooperation for the future that we actually need.
Yeah, definitely. I think in terms of building on cooperation, this is something that definitely needs to be addressed. But thank you so much for that insight again, Anders, and we'll speak to you again on the podcast soon. This episode of the Weekly Defence Podcast was brought to you in partnership with our sponsor, Nammo. As always, a big thanks to everyone who gave their time to be part of this week's episode. And for our listeners, make sure you like and subscribe, leave a review on iTunes, and tell a friend or colleague about the podcast. Until next week, thanks for listening.